The painted staircase? I inherited my aunt's house on a bleak autumn afternoon, under a sky choked with low gray clouds. Aunt Serena had died suddenly, leaving me her sprawling Victorian home on the outskirts of Ravenswick, a place as remote and brooding as the rumors about it. I hadn't visited her estate since childhood, but I remembered the rickety floors, the echoing hallways, and the door frames tall enough to make me feel like a mouse in a giant's dwelling. Chapter 1. Arrival at Ravenswick. The taxi driver dropped me at the front gates, muttering something about bad omens before speeding off into the drizzle. My breath caught in my throat as I gazed at the house looming at the end of a winding path. The porch columns, once pristine white, had yellowed and flaked. A single tarnished chandelier gleamed faintly through the large front window. I hesitated, fiddling with the keys my aunt's lawyer had mailed me. A swirl of leaves scuttled across the path, like a silent warning to turn back. But I'd come too far. Mustering courage, I pushed open the creaky front door. The foyer was huge, with a grand wooden staircase rising to the shadowy second floor. My footsteps echoed on the dusty parquet. I half expected Aunt Serena to appear at the top landing, arms outstretched for a hug. But the silence was absolute, just the hiss of wind outside and my own pounding pulse. Chapter 2. The Mysterious Painting. I explored room after room, flicking on lights that flickered uncertainly. Most of the furniture was shrouded in sheets, dust motes dancing in the golden lamplight. Then, turning a corner in the main hallway, I encountered something unexpected, a painting leaning against the wall near the stairs. At first glance, it was a landscape in thick oils, a countryside at dusk, heavy clouds brewing overhead. The brushstrokes were violent, swirling gray skies and twisted black trees. But what chilled me was the staircase featured in the lower right corner of the canvas, an exact replica of the grand wooden staircase behind me. Even the banister's spiral carvings matched. Yet the painting's steps were streaked with dark stains, reminiscent of dried blood. Beneath the painting, Aunt Serena's scrawling signature read, S. Ashcroft, The Painted Staircase. Aunt Serena was never an artist as far as I knew. Confusion gave way to unease. The painting felt alive. I could almost see the clouds shifting in the half-lit corridor, or hear leaves rustling in the depicted trees. An unsettling sense that the painting was looking at me, or mocking me. I propped it upright, dusted it off, then carried it upstairs to a spare bedroom, intending to store it away. Something about leaving it in the hallway unnerved me. Chapter 3. Nighttime Footsteps. Darkness fell quickly in Ravenswick. I found the old generator in the basement barely functional, so most rooms remained unlit. After a meager dinner of canned soup, I retreated to the master bedroom, locking the door behind me. The estate felt huge and empty, the walls humming with echoes of the past. Around midnight, I bolted awake to the sound of footsteps on the landing outside my door. Slow, deliberate steps, each accompanied by a soft creak of wood. My throat constricted. I remembered all the times as a kid I'd felt certain someone was watching me from behind a curtain or around a corner. I'd always blamed my imagination, but now every hair on my arms prickled with primal fear. Trying not to breathe too loudly, I waited. The footsteps stopped near my door, then turned and faded down the corridor. I exhaled shakily. Could it be a trespasser? Or maybe the caretaker for Aunt Serena's estate? I forced my trembling legs to move, creeping into the hallway. It lay silent and dim, lit only by my flashlight's narrow beam. Nothing. No sign of forced entry, no caretaker in sight. But at the top of the stairs, I spotted something that made my stomach lurch. 2 faint footprints in the dust, facing the painting's original spot. Chapter 4. Disturbing Changes. Morning came gray and damp. Determined not to scare myself into running away, I busied myself with sorting Aunt Serena's belongings. She kept diaries, journals, shelves of esoteric books on local legends, Ravenswick myths, phantom roads, haunted staircases, a collection of New England folklore. The titles alone gave me chills. I wandered into the spare bedroom to see about packing away that eerie painting. My heart nearly stopped. The painting was different. The clouds overhead were darker, swirling in menacing shapes. Worse, the staircase that once showed only faint red streaks was now heavily streaked with fresh crimson lines. I blinked, disbelieving. Could I have misremembered it? A dusty mirror on the dresser reflected my pale face. No one else was in the room. Feeling half mad, I took a photo of the painting with my phone, determined to compare it later. Maybe it was always that way. Maybe the bad lighting last night made me see less detail. As I snapped the picture, a voice behind me whispered, "Leave it alone." I whirled, nearly dropping the phone. The bedroom was empty, just me and the painting's silent malevolence. Chapter 5. A Ghostly Warning. That evening, I heard a tentative knock on the front door. Heart pounding, I answered it. A middle-aged man in a worn coat stood on the stoop, hat in hand. He introduced himself as Thomas Greeley, once Aunt Serena's gardener. "Miss Ashcroft, I'm sorry for your loss," he said softly. I heard you arrived. Thought you might want to know. Your aunt had been troubled the last few months. Acting strange, refusing to let me inside. She spoke of nightmares." My chest tightened. "Nightmares?" He nodded. She claimed the house had awakened, that it demanded something. She locked herself away, painting day and night. His gaze flicked behind me, as if searching for something. Said the staircase was the key. I swallowed. The painted staircase? Thomas's eyes widened. "You found it, then?" He sighed, shoulders dropping. I tried to warn her to get rid of that cursed canvas, but she insisted it was the only way to... He clamped his mouth shut abruptly. "Only way to what?" I pressed. He shook his head. "Never mind. Just watch yourself at night. The painting can twist your mind. If you see anything moving in it, leave this place. Don't wait." Before I could ask more, Thomas retreated into the twilight as if fleeing a plague. I was left with 1,000 questions and a growing sense of doom. Chapter 6. The Apparition at the Stairs. By candlelight, I pored over Aunt Serena's diaries, flipping pages seeking mention of the painting. Most entries were mundane: baking, errands, calls with the lawyer, until about 3 months ago, when they turned frantic. "Something in the house calls to me from the staircase at night. I've started painting it, like I can't stop. Each brushstroke reveals more blood, more shadows. I fear it's feeding on me." Another entry. "I woke to footprints outside my door. There's a figure in my painting now, lurking behind the banister. I see it staring, like it wants to come out." My heart hammered. A figure in the painting? That definitely hadn't been there earlier. Or had it? A crash startled me out of my reading. It came from the grand staircase. I grabbed my flashlight and hurried to the banister, fear clawing my stomach. The corridor lamp flickered gloomily. Then I heard it, a low moan from below. Stepping carefully, I descended halfway down. The painting was back in the hallway, leaning against the stair's base, even though I'd left it in the spare bedroom. My skin prickled with cold dread. Someone, something, had moved it. Worst of all, there was now a smudge of white paint in the shape of a person at the top corner of the painted staircase. The figure was incomplete, ghostly, as if half finished by an unseen hand, or half emerged. Chapter 7. A Terrifying Vision. My flashlight flickered. Another moan echoed, this time from behind me. I spun around only to see Aunt Serena standing at the landing, her eyes hollow, face unnaturally pale. She raised an arm in a silent plea. I stifled a scream. Aunt Serena was dead. This couldn't be real. My flashlight flickered again, and in that instant she vanished, replaced by swirling shadows. My knees nearly buckled with terror. Somehow I forced myself to approach the painting. My reflection in its glossy sheen trembled alongside the newly added figure. A swirl of dizziness struck me. My mind plunged into a vision. I was standing on these very stairs, but the house was in ruins. Blood spattered the walls. A monstrous silhouette clung to the banister. In the painting, the figure turned its head slowly to face me, its eyes twin voids of black. Thunder rattled the windows, and from the painting's depths, a voice croaked, "We are not yet finished." I jolted back to reality, gasping. The painting's surface was still, but the uneasy sense of something breathing in the shadows remained. Chapter 8. A Desperate Plan. Determined to end the madness, I grabbed the painting and dragged it out the front door, ignoring the slicing wind. The yard was lit by a flickering lamppost. My plan: burn it. I'd find a way to set it on fire. But as I fumbled with matches near the old stone fire pit, an impossible weight pressed on me, like a gravitational force resisting my attempt. Each match refused to spark, the wind swirling violently, extinguishing any flame. My arms trembled with fatigue, and the painting's surface seemed to pulse, as if alive with defiance. Then footsteps crunched behind me. "That won't work," came Thomas Greeley's voice. He emerged from the darkness, shoulders hunched. "Your aunt tried it. The painting always reappears inside, unharmed." I glared at him, half deranged. "Then how do I get rid of it? Or do I run away?" His gaze flicked to the twisted oak near the property line. "Serena once said you have to finish what's started. Complete the painting's demands. Only then can you destroy it." I stared. "That's insane." "Finish it how?" He hesitated, eyes full of regret. "She mentioned blood, a final brushstroke. She refused to do it, and it took her. That's all I know." Before I could ask more, he retreated into the gloom again, as if he'd only dared approach for a moment. Coward or wise, I couldn't decide. Chapter 9. The Final Night. Back inside, the house felt suffocating. The painting was propped again by the staircase, the half-formed figure closer to completion. The dark clouds overhead in the scene looked so realistic, I half expected lightning to flash out of it. My reflection hovered near the banister in that glossy sheen. The figure's face. It resembled me. My heart seized with horror. The memory of Aunt Serena's diary flickered in my mind. There's a figure in my painting now, lurking behind the banister. It wants to come out. Was it her once, and now it was me, the painting's next victim? No, I wouldn't let that happen. If Thomas was right, completing the painting with a final brushstroke of blood was the only way. Trembling, I fetched Aunt Serena's old painting supplies from the attic. Indeed, there was a wide brush crusted with dried red paint. My stomach churned. Had she used her own blood? The wind outside howled like 1,000 lost souls. I knelt before the painting, knife in hand, ready to open a cut on my palm. This felt hideously wrong, but if it meant breaking the curse. Chapter 10. Shadows Unleashed. Right as I pressed the knife to my skin, the entire house groaned. Floorboards shook. The overhead light flickered wildly. A thunderous crash echoed from the upper landing, as if something massive prowled. Then came a roar of wind down the staircase, swirling dust, forcing me to shield my eyes. A swirl of shadows coalesced around the painting, shaping into a tall, gaunt silhouette. Its face was blank, but I recognized the twisted posture, like the half-finished figure in the painting. It reached a spindly arm toward me, fingers elongated, beckoning. From overhead, I heard Aunt Serena's voice moaning, "Go! Finish it! or it will finish you. Gritting my teeth, I drew the blade across my palm, wincing as pain flared. I smeared the blood on the brush, heart pounding. The silhouette stepped closer, features forming, matching my face. Its mouth parted in a silent wail. Chapter 11. Completion and Collapse. With shaking hands, I painted a single stroke across the figure's chest, using my own blood as the medium. The painting hissed, as though exhaling. The silhouette in front of me writhed, lunging forward. I braced for impact, but a bright flash erupted from the canvas, like lightning made of black and red. In a dazzling instant, the figure collapsed into a swirl of color, merging back into the painting's surface. The overhead light exploded, plunging the foyer into darkness. My scream caught in my throat. Then silence. A heavy hush that felt infinite. When I fumbled for my flashlight and shone it on the painting, the clouds and staircase remained. But the figure was now fully rendered, a perfect likeness of me crouched behind the banister, face twisted in terror. Yet something felt dormant, as if the painting had just sealed its own fate. Chapter 12. The Shocking Truth. Dawn crept in. Exhausted, I slumped on the bottom step, the painting leaning quietly against the banister. Thomas arrived at sunrise, face pinched with worry. One look at the completed figure and his shoulders relaxed. "You did it," he whispered. "It's over." "I think so," I said, voice numb. I brushed my bloody palm across my trousers. "Now we can destroy it, right?" He knelt by the painting, lifting a candle's flame to its edge. This time, the canvas caught fire. The flames licked across the swirling clouds, devouring the red lines of the staircase figure. With a sense of relief so strong it made me gasp, I watched the painting crumble to ash. Smoke drifted up the stairwell. Then, to my horror, the burned shape of the figure remained imprinted on the floor. A charred outline, my own silhouette, embedded in the wood. Thomas hissed, stepping back. "That shouldn't happen." Before either of us could react, the outline twitched, like a living shadow. In a crack of final malevolence, it darted across the floor, up the banister, and vanished into the upper hallway. My heart pounded. The painting was gone, but something had escaped. Something that had once been inside the painting. Suddenly, footsteps thundered overhead, racing. The house quaked. The front door slammed shut on its own. Thomas and I scrambled after the noise, fear choking us. Chapter 13. The Staircase's Secret. We climbed the steps 2 at a time. The corridor lights flickered, revealing a hidden door at the hallway's far end, previously concealed behind wallpaper. It was ajar now, dust swirling in its opening. The footsteps seemed to rush inside. Breath shallow, I crept through the doorway, Thomas behind me. We entered a small, windowless chamber, the walls etched with more swirling symbols. At the room's center lay a single coffin, an antique, intricately carved. My chest seized with cold dread. Etched on the coffin's lid was Aunt Serena's name, along with the painted staircase motif. She'd hidden this. Why? In that moment, the silhouette reappeared, flickering on the coffin lid. It shaped into my likeness again. Then, with a whisper like a dying breath, it sank into the wood. Silence pressed down on us, thick and suffocating. Thomas fumbled for words. "What does it want?" My throat felt raw. "It's taking a new form. Another prison? Or—" Without warning, the coffin lid lurched open. We both staggered back. Dust and the stench of decay wafted out. Inside lay Aunt Serena's remains, gray and crumbling, but now they moved, arms flexing with skeletal grace. Her hollow eye sockets turned to me, jaw dropping in a silent scream. A shockwave of black mist erupted, sending Thomas and me crashing into the walls. I glimpsed Aunt Serena's form climbing from the coffin, the silhouette swirling around her bones. My aunt's voice hissed. The painting was only the beginning. Chapter 14. the shattering climax. She lurched toward me, half skeleton, half living shadow. My body refused to move, pinned by some invisible force. Thomas tried to intervene, only for her bony hand to slash across his chest. He collapsed, gasping. Time seemed to slow. Aunt Serena, this abomination, leaned in, her eyeless sockets staring into my soul. Then she pressed a cold, bony finger to my forehead. Visions flooded my mind, centuries of damned souls, each forced into paintings, coffins, anything that could hold the shadow that wanted to escape. She wanted me to continue it, to carry the burden, let the shadows feed. My heart hammered. I forced my shaking hand to retrieve the knife still in my pocket. Summoning my last scrap of courage, I plunged it into her chest, a savage, desperate act. The skeleton shrieked, black mist spiraling from the wound. A final eruption of thunder rattled the entire house. In one explosive moment, Aunt Serena's form collapsed into dust. The swirling shadows recoiled, howling, then imploded, swirling into the coffin. The coffin lid snapped shut with bone-rattling finality. A wave of silence followed, so dense I couldn't breathe. Then the hidden door slammed shut, the chamber's symbols glowing faintly before fading into normal walls. Chapter 15. The Final Shocking End. All went still. I tore the door open, half dragging Thomas out, his chest bleeding but still breathing. We staggered through the corridor, down the battered staircase. Outside, dawn's light cast the estate in a surreal calm. The painted staircase was destroyed, the shadow sealed away. For now. Thomas coughed, clutching his wound. "Burn it all," he gasped. "The house. Bury these secrets." I nodded, tears blurring my vision. He collapsed on the lawn, and I stumbled to the generator shed for fuel. By mid-morning, flames consumed the Victorian estate, black smoke spiraling into the pale sky. We watched from afar, haunted but resolute, until the last timber crashed. An ambulance arrived for Thomas soon after. I gave no real explanation to the locals, just electrical fire. No one pressed. Ravenswick folks seemed relieved the old estate was finally gone. Exhausted, I climbed into my rental car, deciding to never look back at that cursed land. My phone buzzed, a new message from an unknown number. "You have destroyed the house, but the staircase remains." I froze, chest clenching. Could the shadow still exist somewhere? A cold shiver claimed me. My phone screen flickered. Then, unbelievably, a single image appeared. A photo of me inside the estate, standing at the top of the same grand stairs, the painted staircase behind me. I never took such a photo. My blood ran ice cold as I realized. It had my image. The shadow, or the house, wasn't done with me after all. I stared at the picture until my vision blurred. Then, with trembling fingers, I deleted it. But deep in my gut, I knew the truth. Once claimed by the painted staircase, you remain part of its horror forever. Whether in ashes, shadows, or a photo that shouldn't exist, it always finds a way.